Mushrooms are so crazy. That's why I love them. It's healing. Some can kill you. Some can heal you. Some are just delicious. There's just so many different ways mushrooms are used.
Kaitlyn Kuehn is a plant biologist and mushroom expert who hosts the Flora Funga Podcast, where she explores the hidden intelligence of fungi, the science of healing plants, and how nature may hold the key to our future.
A lot of people struggling with PTSD, you kind of just have that calming effect where you can now kind of go out in the real world and you're just not ambushed by all of these different emotions and other things that has happened to you. You just breathe homeostasis.
Is there any evidence showing that mushrooms can slow down cognitive decline?
Reishi mushroom is the oldest studied mushroom and used for so many different things, like detoxing to inflammation with diabetes, cognitive benefits, nerve healing, digestion health. There's so many different medicinal aspects to different mushrooms, and they do have overlapping benefits.
I have such a deep love as a chef for using mushrooms in recipes for their medicinal benefits, the texture, the flavor.
All mushrooms help lower inflammation. As little as a quarter cup a week actually can lower inflammation markers. So it just naturally lowers blood pressure.
Why would someone want to take mushrooms on a daily basis, whether or not they're battling disease or some disorder? Are you a proponent for someone to be taking mushrooms medicinally as a supplement each day?
It really depends on...
Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Switch for Good podcast. I'm your host, Chef Jason Wrobel. Very, very excited to have a new guest to dive into a very specific food that I'm a huge fan of. I have a question before we begin. What if the natural world is speaking to us all the time, but we have not yet learned how to listen? Our guest today, KK, is a plant biologist and mycology enthusiast captivated by the hidden language of plants and fungi. It's a curiosity she explores as the host of the Flora Funga Podcast, and each and every week she weaves together science, storytelling, and thoughtful conversations to illuminate the often overlooked roles that these organisms play in our ecosystems, in our health, and our future. We're going to dive into all that. So through expert interviews and solo deep dives, KK makes complex topics accessible, inviting the listeners to think more critically with a touch of wonder and awe about the natural world around them. KK, welcome to the Switch for Good podcast. It's great to have you.
Wow. Thank you for having me, Jason. That was a perfectly put intro, like way better than I could have even put together. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I'm super excited when I got the information about you that comes into our inbox where we get guest pitches. I was like, oh wait, I want to talk for an hour or more on mushrooms. I have such a deep love for, as a chef, for using mushrooms in recipes for their medicinal benefits, the texture, the flavor. I've been a huge fan of mushrooms for years, and I'm really excited just to dive right in with you and learn more about you and your enthusiasm for this. So let's start at ground zero. What is it about these wonderful, mysterious, intelligent organisms that has captivated your attention and enthusiasm in such a profound way? Why mushrooms? What do they mean to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think mushrooms are really trendy right now, but what really got me into it was plants. So since I went to school for plant biology, I really learned how connected everything was. You can't really have plants without fungi. Can't really have fungi without the plants. They really grow together. I would say about 90% of all plants have a mycorrhizal relationship, with the plant and the fungi itself. So it doesn't really thrive just on its own. It kind of needs a little help, gathering nutrients, kind of spreading, communicating, things like that. So I really got into mushrooms because of the plant world. Went to school for that. And then I think a lot of people get into mushrooms based on Paul Stamets. So he's kind of the mushroom guy, the guru, the father of fungi. So that book, my mom actually gifted it to me. Mycelium Running is the book that got me really into it. Just really learned how connected everything was. So I just fell down that rabbit hole of that. And, there's so many different avenues that people get into with fungi. So cooking is a good avenue. A lot of people go foraging, a lot of people like photography, art, nerdy topics. So I feel like I really got captivated into it, but it's also very broad that it's starting to invite a lot of different people in. And I love that.
Right on. So you mentioned communication, which I want to pause there because that's interesting. I think probably some of our listeners might hear that word and go, wait, what communicates? So can you share some fascinating ways that plants and fungi communicate, especially in ways that might be noticeable or detectable to humans?
In the forest, you see all of these trees. Sometimes there's, older pine trees, sometimes there's younger saplings. So, what happens is there's baby trees and they need to gather nutrients, but sometimes there's, the trees are so far between each other that the root systems don't always connect. And so, the fungi itself will help connect all of these things underneath the soil and kind of gather nutrients, a little bit more like moisture or water and other things to connect them. So that's kind of what the communication technically is. It's not really like them talking to each other. It's more it's more of like the frequencies that the trees and plants give out, kind of calling upon these different nutrients that they need to survive and thrive. And so the fungi really take into a part of connecting all those things. And it's not just fungi. There's like worms and other arthropods and all these little microbes that really go unnoticed, and so it's all really connected. And that's what I really treasure about the world is it's so vast and you don't really see them, but seeing is not always believing.
So it's a whole universe. I mean, what you're describing
Yes.
to me is it sounds like it's just a micro universe under our feet.
Yes.
One of the things I love to do is go on hikes. I've done a little bit of mushroom foraging in the past, but now that I'm up in a forested environment, I'm looking forward to doing more of it. It brings up to me almost this sort of existential question, if you will, about sort of the foundational elements of life itself. And so what comes up for me is when you describe this symbiotic relationship, life being about cooperation or selfishness. And so what do you see in the plant kingdom that might help answer this quandary? Is it more about symbiosis and cooperation, or are there some selfish tendencies within the plant world that are also acknowledged?
Yeah, so a lot of people think that it's all like hunky dory underneath and just like no competition.
Okay.
And so people call it the wood wide web. I don't know if you've heard of that at all, but that's
No.
kind of like the mycorrhizal fungi and like everything's communicating underneath. But a lot of mycologists are like, no, you're spreading false information because there's so much competition between the organisms. So even between like that adult tree and the baby tree, maybe they're still fighting for those nutrients because in a forest, you're also fighting for light. And so if you're not having that adequate, photosynthesis, then you're not going to thrive and you're not going to grow as tall and have that space that you want as well. So there's always competition within, species, the same species or different as well. So we're always fighting, but I think there is some cooperation also. And that's what really fascinates me. That's what got me into mushrooms is kind of the communication between and how do they communicate? How are all of these, plants even communicate kind of to insects in a way? There's just like so much that we don't really know. And so that's what I'm really eager to get more hands-on research with.
Fascinating. Okay, so let's talk about evolution for a second. Do plants, do specifically, since we're here talking about mushrooms, do they evolve in a similar way as animals or mammalian species do? And if they do, if there is an evolution, what might that long game be?
Mushrooms definitely came first. I forget what the name of them are, but it's actually in the mycelium running book. There used to be long and huge mushrooms that were like feet tall. So it's like prehistoric fungi where they used to just be like huge, look like boulders in a way. I wish I had a picture to show you, but yeah, it was like one of the oldest studied fungi. And so they're kind of like the first things that kind of evolved. But their whole goal is to spread the spores. And so, kind of like The Last of Us, where the cordyceps wants to go up to the highest point and then try to spread the spores to kind of gather other ants or other insects that it inhabits. And so, like, the main focus for these mushrooms is kind of to like spread that. And that's why you see mushrooms around. I try to educate that the mycelium is also kind of part of the fungus. And so the mushroom part is only, the fruiting body part, or whoop, this side. These are the mushrooms. Whoop, there we go. The mushrooms here. So those are all fruiting bodies that you're seeing, but it's all fungus in itself. But the parts of the mushroom or the fungus that you eat is called the mushroom. The bastiocarp. That's kind of their main focus is to open up and spread the spores. So evolutionarily wise, we're just trying to move and evolve and kind of spread the seed, spread the spores.
I'm curious about the actual sort of structure of mushrooms. This was maybe a few weeks ago. I was in the kitchen cooking. I think I was working with shiitakes, and the person I was with said, "Hey, aren't you going to use the stems?" And I was like, "Use the stems, like cook the stems." And I had almost this really interesting reaction to cooking. I'm like, "Aren't they too fibrous?" And it's funny because the only time I've ever seen perhaps mushroom stems being used in any culinary capacity has been making stock or broths, things like that. Are there any distinct medicinal benefits? And are there any specific mushrooms from a culinary perspective where you can use the stems? And is there any advantage in doing so?
It's funny that you say that. All the mushrooms that I've cooked with or sold, so I also sell culinary mushrooms at the farmers markets. Yeah, so I'm very familiar with, all of these different oyster mushrooms, black poplar, chestnut, lion's mane. Shiitake is definitely the only mushroom that I know of that you don't eat the stem. And because it is very woody, and so people don't usually eat them unless they're really immature and they're a little bit more squishy, then you can actually chew on them. Honestly, it's just not a preference. I'm sure you could chop them up and like eat them, but it's just really fibrous and high in chitin. And so I just don't really use the shiitake stems, but all the other mushrooms I use the stems for. They could be just a little more chunky, but I just chop it up smaller.
You mentioned chitin. I don't know what chitin is. Can you elucidate?
Yeah, chitin is what mushrooms are made out of. So it's kind of the same material as like lobster claws. And so that's why you don't really eat mushrooms raw. One thing I would want to say is please don't eat mushrooms raw. They all have mycotoxins. Definitely cook through your mushrooms. It's easier to digest when you cook them. It breaks down the chitin, tastes better, and it's more nutrient dense for you just because your body can actually absorb those nutrients. So, imagine eating a lobster claw. You're not really gonna digest that appropriately. But yeah, so if you cook your mushrooms down just a few minutes, 10 minutes, you can consume it then.
I'm glad that you made that distinction because I think I assume that most people probably know that not to eat mushrooms raw, but we can't assume that because if someone's new
Never
to
assume.
mushrooms, never assume. Exactly.
Never assume.
Yeah, we don't want people eating around here eating more raw mushrooms all over the place.
Oh, yeah. Morels are specific also because they have a specific, I'm going to butcher the chemical, but it's made out of like jet fuel. And so it's the same mycotoxin or toxin that's in jet fuel. So if you don't cook them, you actually get a morel poisoning. So recently, somebody at a sushi restaurant got taken to the ER. I don't know if they died, but the chef decided to cook with morel mushrooms, but did not cook them for the sushi. And so somebody consumed it raw and had this whole reaction, got morel poisoning, was taken to the hospital. So yeah, definitely don't eat morels raw. I think a lot of people still eat the white button mushrooms, but they still have mycotoxins. Paul Stamets is like a huge advocate for no agaricus species, which is the white button, the baby bella, and the portobello. They're actually all the same mushroom, just at different growth stages. If you didn't know and you're like, I only had one mushroom or I've tried all these, and I'm like, you've only had one. If you've had just those, it's only one species, just at different growth stages. You've been lied to.
Okay, that's a mind blower. I've never heard that. White button, baby bella, and portobello are the same. Okay, so
Same mushroom.
I'm to assume then the white button are the most sort of basic stage, and then they get to baby bella, and then they get massive and get to portobello. Wow,
You got it.
What's the timeline for that?
That's a great question. Mushrooms are a really fast grower. I'd say honestly, it's probably about a week. Really depends on the species. Like lion's mane and oysters kind of grow fast. Maitake, turkey tail grow really slow. Chestnuts and black poplar are kind of slow as well. With the agaricus or the white button, baby bella, and portobello, I'd say it's about a few days that the stages are. So they just harvest them, a few days prior, and then the white ones are probably just grown in the dark, and that's why they're white. So mushrooms have a lot of vitamin D in them, especially if they're shown to the sun to gather the vitamin D.
Amazing. Let's dip back for a second. Why does Paul Stamets recommend not consuming this varietal of, you said it's agaricus?
Yeah, Garrigus species. I think he really believes that there's that mycotoxin in there and you can't cook it down or something. I actually haven't turned to the literature on that. I've just been like hearing, telephone through this. But a lot of people are saying that you might not even be able to cook out the mycotoxin. But I would just recommend cooking all your mushrooms. It's pretty simple. But yeah, I don't know why salad bars like are so adamant about putting those white buttons out there. Honestly, I feel like they don't taste like much. They're gonna taste way better cooked. I'm gonna be real honest.
Agreed. When you are searching for edible mushrooms to play with, obviously you mentioned you sell culinary mushrooms at the farmers market. You have this deep background in plant science. Are you mindful of the health benefits? Obviously, you communicated vitamin D. We know that something like lion's mane has been shown to, boost brain health, and there's all these other incredible benefits. So, when you seek out a mushroom to cook with at home, I'm assuming you cook with mushrooms at home. Are you being really attuned to the functional benefits of the mushrooms you're using?
Yeah, well, it depends what mushroom I'm looking for, and definitely mushrooms grow in seasons. So a lot of the time it's, fall or springtime. Actually, I was traveling in Arizona to find some morels, and I also went back home to Minnesota and found some morels too. And it was just so fascinating how two totally different climates still carry, and have morels there. In Florida, there's none. The closest to me is on the border of Georgia. And so, yeah, I feel like I really miss out on the foraging aspect out there. Florida's just like not the same foraging environment at all. There's gators, it's a swamp. It's just not really my style. You definitely find a lot of different, boletes. We find chanterelles a lot of the times, but I'm not really sure on the health benefits of chanterelle specifically. All mushrooms help lower inflammation, so that's something that I really strive for. As little as a quarter cup a week actually can lower inflammation markers, and that's any type of mushrooms. The white button ones that we were talking shit about. But yeah, all mushrooms actually help because they have statins in them. And so it just like naturally lowers blood pressure and low in calorie. I actually am releasing an episode tomorrow on the protein aspect to mushrooms. And I was always kind of taught like, oh my God, mushrooms have so much protein. But then you kind of look into it and you're like, oh, I don't know. It's just like 1 to 2 grams. But if you have dried mushrooms, that's where the power punch really comes into play. Mushrooms are 90% water. So yeah, they'd have, 1 or 2 grams per, 100 grams of mushrooms. But if you dry them, now you have like a big like 20 to 30 grams of protein, per 100 grams when they're dried.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
a
so I'm releasing a
huge.
whole episode tomorrow because I was like, I don't know. I'll have to do more research. So I found this article that actually broke down different mushrooms with the different layout of protein that's kind of like similar to other meat substitutes or meat proteins.
That's incredible. I've never heard that. And obviously, for most of our listeners who are plant based or vegetarian or vegan looking for protein, that's a huge piece of beneficial information you just dropped. Okay, so dried mushrooms. When I think about dried mushrooms, I think about, dropping them in gravy or using them in soup. That's pretty much it. So if I go out and get myself a bag of dried mushrooms, I want to up my protein intake. I want to get that denser mushroom-based protein. Any other suggestions on what to do with dried mushrooms?
Now that I've learned about the protein aspect, I'm also always looking for protein. I'm a bodybuilder type weightlifter, and I also have rheumatoid arthritis. So I really try to like stick away from certain meats or dairy or things like that. But now that I know about the dried mushroom, we like to also say that if you also have just dried mushrooms, you can grind that up and kind of make it into a seasoning. You could put it like a dry rub on things as well. The mushroom farm that I'm working with, Zephyrgill Mushroom Farm, we're putting together this like mushroom crouton aspect. So the people that always want like those, for some reason people want to put mushrooms on salads, and I'm like, cool, like I guess that's where you're at, the salad bar with the white button. And so we're like, well, instead of, eating raw mushrooms or cooking the mushrooms, putting on the salad, now you can have kind of like a dose of medicinal mushroom aspect too with the croutons. So we're putting together something like that, a cool blend of like turkey tail, cordyceps, lion's mane, some fun different mushrooms.
That's awesome. Okay. So, since we're on the topic of dried mushrooms, one thing that I've noticed in certainly the last decade, going to the natural products trade shows, going to the culinary trade shows, is the massive increase in dried mushroom products. Meaning, I see brands like Om Mushrooms or Four Sigmatic, or you mentioned Paul Stamets' company.
Mushroom coffee.
Yeah, it seems like it is one of those ingredients that has not only captured the imagination of the health-minded public, but there's a
Mhm.
lot of CPG brands investing a lot of money in launching mushroom-based products. So when I think about that, my overall question is, you've got mushrooms in their raw form that you are cooking and putting in a recipe versus a packet of lion's mane and cordyceps and turkey tail, and you've got all these mushroom blends. Do you think that there is benefit in taking these mushroom powders or these mushroom powder blends? Is it hype? Are there some brands that actually have higher potency? And if so, if they are good, what should people look for if they're buying a mushroom superfood supplement? What should we pay attention to, and what's hype?
The mushroom coffee thing really drives me nuts sometimes because because like people are taking it for maybe like lowering bloating or digestion health, and it's always paired with coffee. And it's like, yeah, of course you're gonna have better digestion. It's coffee. You're supposed to like, shit after and like doing all these things, and it's gonna move through you. And I think that's like a perfect business plan to pair the coffee, something that most, humans drink on a daily basis in the morning to kind of get your day started. So they built this into a routine that most people already have. So I think it's a brilliant, business plan. And yeah, I don't think that they're all equal. There's certain ones where the powder could be or the mushrooms could be grown on like treated wood. So there's this whole controversy of making sure that the mushrooms aren't from China. But honestly, it's kind of just, you really have to know the sources. I think in China or random, other countries don't have the regulations that maybe the US does on what to grow on. So some people are trying to cut profit and grow mushrooms on treated wood, treated pallets, and that's not obviously healthy for consumption. So yeah, really knowing where the mushrooms come from, how old is the product. You don't really want to consume mushrooms that have been powdered, for the past years. So kind of like keeping up to date. It's kind of like a seasoning where, they'll kind of lose the potency after a year or two. So making sure it's, fresher, and then making sure that the dosage on the packaging is like a medicinal dose. So if it's, less than 2 grams, it's not really technically a medicinal dose. They've just kind of sprinkled in, a little bit of lion's mane, a little bit of cordyceps, but then most of it's filler, like the coffee or whatever ingredients they have in there. I'd say there's definitely a lot of good brands out there, but there's definitely a lot that are just hopping on the mushroom trend. I actually did a whole breakdown on my podcast on kind of how to pick your favorite mushroom coffee. That's something that I love to do on the channel. Is I like to do reviews on different mushroom products. I honestly would say stay away from the gummies. Most of the time there's a lot of sugar in them, and so what you're trying to do is, heal your inflammation, and now you're just including more sugar, and that's just not beneficial with that. But yeah, the coffee aspect is a brilliant idea. I like Everyday Dose. I definitely have Hamilton's products. Real Mushrooms is a good one. There's a lot of good brands out there. So yeah, just make sure, look at the ingredient list, see where they're grown, what's the concentration of the dosage that they're giving you. Let's see if it's worth the price point.
If I look at something like a reishi powder or a shaga powder, and it'll say things like a 30 to 1 extract, 40 to 1 extract, 50 to 1 extract. Can you explain more of that? Because I see that on labels all the time.
Yeah, I know, and I wish I knew more of that. I definitely covered that on one of my episodes. So I interview Hamilton's mushrooms, and he goes in super in depth with the ratio. This was actually a question that I kind of asked him. I think 3 to 1 is the normal. But yeah, if it's like higher than that, it's like obscene. But I would have to turn back to the literature to really have a straight answer on that. But yeah, definitely see what the percentage or the milligrams. I like to say like the whole thing about like 2 grams. There's tinctures out there where you can evaporate the mixture in there and, see how much is left over in the extract or the tincture. And sometimes it's less than, a gram or half gram, and that's obviously not a medicinal dose for you.
When it comes to like researching the specific health benefits, you'd mentioned that, and you have rheumatoid arthritis, you've mentioned anti-inflammatory benefits. I'm curious, and I realize there's so many different species of mushrooms, but top line, why would someone want to take mushrooms on a daily basis, whether or not they're battling disease or some disorder? Are you a proponent for someone to be taking mushrooms medicinally as a supplement each day? Is that something that all humans should be doing if they have the option to do so?
Yeah, it really depends on if you're struggling with something specific. So some mushrooms will help, more so. So I was covering inflammation. And so the top mushrooms with that would be reishi and chaga. A lot of people also use turkey tail. But yeah, I think definitely eating mushrooms on a weekly basis, definitely taking different kind of supplements for mushrooms as well. I'm a big proponent of like including them in your routine. So if you're not cooking like you do all the time, definitely take tinctures. So something that I like to do is I just take these are just like, different extracts, tinctures for different things. So I just have so many different options that I have. And so depending on how I feel, like sometimes a little bit low energy, I would take some lion's mane. If I maybe want to do a little pre-workout, also a lot of people are taking cordyceps for kind of that energy boost, respiration. If I'm feeling like I'm getting sick, I would take something more immune boosting. So like turkey tail, reishi would be a good one. A reishi mushroom is the oldest studied mushroom and used for so many different things like detoxing to inflammation. Actually was shown to help with diabetes, like lowering diabetes, and like lion's manes for that cognitive benefits, nerve healing, digestion health. There's so many different medicinal aspects to different mushrooms, and they do have overlapping benefits. So just kind of trying out to see what you like and how it works on your body. Everybody's different. A lot of people actually put lion's mane into like protein powders. So if you do like protein shakes or smoothies, I don't always have a smoothie. I don't always have a protein shake every day. So that's kind of why I use different avenues. So sometimes I layer up with cooking my oyster mushrooms, but then also taking my like tinctures or extracts. So kind of depends on what you're trying to target. That's kind of how I'd go about it. Try different things. Try it in the morning. Try it at night. See what you like more of. It's all experimental. And I say with any supplement, after it takes about a month, maybe multiple months to really feel the medicinal aspects to mushrooms. But it's kind of like the long game, effect where it's kind of like supplement, the longer you take it, the more it like works with your body. So that's kind of how I'd recommend taking mushrooms. It's not really like a one-time thing and you're like, I'm healed. You also have to focus on like the non-sexy parts, like how is your sleep? How is your diet? How is your movement? All of these other things. I think those things really is a key thing to helping with my RAs. Like, have I had enough sleep is like the main thing. And then, diet, and then having those supplements of different mushrooms really kind of pack a punch as well.
Awesome. So when I think about mushrooms coming into mainstream consciousness, whether that's people in the culinary industry or medical professionals, people like yourself who have studied plant medicine, plant science, are there any mushrooms that are sort of, how do I explain this, poised for the big come up, right? Like as an example, 10 years ago, I didn't know lion's mane existed. And then lion's mane came into my consciousness, and now I'm seeing lion's mane everywhere. It's in products. There's a random market, and I mean very random market, sort of down the street from where I live. In this little hole-in-the-wall market has lion's mane in their produce section. So in your research of mushrooms and the entire universe, is there anything that you see poised to kind of like make that jump into the mainstream that maybe people don't know about? Or is there something you're excited about in terms of one or two mushrooms that you just want to be like, yo, you need to know about this?
I actually have a friend, William Padilla Brown, who's doing tons of research on truffles, and he believes that that's like the mushroom. It's if you don't know what a truffle is, it's an underground little, I guess mushroom, but it looks, it's just like a little nugget that's kind of buried within underneath the ground. So it's very hard to find. People train dogs or pigs to find these fungi. And so, yeah, he was just saying that it's like the mushroom to have. And I would love to have him back on the podcast, but he actually sells extracts of it. So the little tinctures. And he was just like, it helps immune system. It helps all of these different things. And so I'm like, whoa, I'm like so curious. And my mind's been open to this. So he just told me about it a few weeks ago that he's been kind of traveling the world and finding all these different places where you can find truffles and doing this whole documentary on it. So that's something that I want to look into more is like the truffle game. I think reishi is another one that I mean, a lot of people love lion's mane because it's such a tasty medicinal mushroom, but a lot of the top medicinal mushrooms are really hard. They are like rocks that grow on trees, and so you don't technically consume them or cook them. You usually, steam them, boil them, soak them in alcohol water or like glycerin to extract the benefits. So that's kind of how a lot of extracts are made, those different three extract. Or ultrasonic is another way that people are kind of getting the medicinal aspects out of it. So that's where reishi and chaga, like this top medicinal for inflammation, comes into play because they're a very hard mushroom, very bitter to really like, sip on a tea. So I think we have to readjust how people understand mushrooms. And, sometimes you just got to get into the bitter stuff and like know that that's healing as well. It's not tasty, but it's going to be very medicinal. So hopefully people kind of understand that having a bitter substance is also good.
Awesome. One thing that I've heard for years is this philosophy that mushrooms have a consciousness. I want to dip out of the medicinal benefits and the health benefits and dip into some more esoteric topics. Do you believe mushrooms have consciousness? Is there a consciousness to the mushroom kingdom?
I feel like they know what's going on. I feel like they know how to go about what they're doing, how to connect different things. There's this research, I guess, out there. This is on a slime mold, so it's technically not a fungus, but they put it in a maze and it actually could figure out the exit of the maze just by growing toward it. And that's how I think Tokyo or some sort of like subway system was also created. It's like compared to the mycelium, growing, very similar to how the internet kind of works. Same on like the brain neurons and like the same patterning system. So I think mushrooms are just really efficient. And that's what I really like about them too. So you could say that they're smart or intelligent. I think there's some sort of like awareness there of what is going on and what they're doing and where they're growing. So yeah, again, I'm just so excited for this upcoming research. So many people are interested in mushrooms, and this is what I'm interested in as well. Like, what's the future of fungi even look like?
Do you feel like mushrooms, as we hurtle into very interesting times and uncertain future for humanity, can mushrooms and this intelligence that mushrooms possess, can they help humans take the next evolutionary leap? And if so, how?
Yeah, I feel like so many people are including mushrooms or fungi into breaking up, plastics and oil spills, breaking up cigarette butts. So there's so
Whoa.
many, yeah, there's tons of research and studies now that you're taking an oyster mushroom, Pleurotus species, and kind of breaking up plastics. There's tons of different ones too that are just the fungi, so not like actual, mushroom bodies, but the fungi where it can be grown in darkness without oxygen. So there's something where you can kind of break up all these plastics, and I think that's what's really going to pop off. I did a Juicy News breakdown of this microfilm or mycofilm technically, and so they're trying to replace and make this edible biodegradable like film biofilm made out of mycelium. And so the idea is kind of replacing plastic bags with this substance. So I think there's so many, I love how I'm just blowing your mind with all these different things that fungi can do.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So what we're talking about is in essence a form of bioremediation.
Yep, exactly.
Are they also taking mushrooms in terms of, say, industrial waste, toxic waste spills, things like that? Is there an application there as well?
Yep, absolutely. It even works better with plants being alongside of it too. So you got like the phyto aspects to it. So kind of different, they work together to break down. So some things can break down like the bio parts, the other parts have to use for like the chemical breakdown. So them together, like the plants and the fungi together, actually really help better than just having the one aspect by itself.
I want to clarify when you say breakdown.
Yeah. Yep. Or like break up, technically.
Break up. Okay.
Yes.
So the mushrooms are not eating the toxic substances per se.
Mm-hmm.
But when
I think some do.
Really?
I think some
like literally
do.
consume it.
Yep. Literally
Wow.
consume it into itself, and then they're not detectable somehow. So like you could, I think somebody did this research on like how you could technically eat that mushroom after, and I was like, whoa, that seems too far. But yeah, mostly I think it's like breaking up, and then the plants could break up more. There's different plants and fungi that can do different things depending on what you're trying to break up.
And then as it's breaking up these toxic substances or plastic materials, as you alluded to, does it render the toxic substances inert? Does it sort of deactivate the toxicity?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Wow, that's so wild.
Yeah, I feel like there's just like answers to everything, but we don't even know what these answers are. Like I didn't even know you could like break up a cigarette, the leftover parts. I just feel like there's so many different fungi that can do different things.
What do you think is the barrier to mass adoption of this technology? If this is the case and we've demonstrated the scientific efficacy of using mushroom species to remediate toxins and dangerous chemicals in our environment, what's preventing it from being used on a much larger scale? What do you think's going on there?
I think it could be either money or people just aren't used to it. Like the bigger corporations don't have all the evidence. So since it's a new discovery, they're saying that there's no real evidence that this actually works, even though we've repeated it, once or twice. But they're saying, it doesn't count if it hasn't really been used in the past. And it's like, aren't we trying to learn like new ways to help the earth? But I think also money could be an aspect too. I actually interviewed Danielle Stevenson. She is all about microremediation, and she was talking about how it's actually cheaper. It's just they're kind of set in their ways. They think it's easier to move around the soil for microremediation. So a lot of the times they're moving all of the soil and dumping it somewhere else, like in the middle of the night, where they could just inoculate technically all of these sites, these super fun sites, to clean them up. So I feel like they're just thinking of it wrong. They're trying to move the toxins away when we could just plant plants and like bring all of the stuff to the sites. So yeah, I don't know what the disconnect is. I think it's just like they have a lack of scientific evidence that it works.
So if we couldn't use this to address climate change, it's just these barriers are in place. But it sounds like we have nature's technology at our behest. But man, the frustration in being like, come on, humans, let's get it together. Come on, governing bodies and governments and corporations. It's, the knowledge is there. The demonstrable efficacy is there. Yet here we go into bureaucracy and barriers again and preventing technology that could help humanity from flourishing. Do you find that frustrating?
It's so frustrating. Like in my field, there's so many frustrating aspects. I could even touch into the psychedelic topic. Even a lot of my friends on like Instagram, Facebook, they have this, education platform where they're talking about microdosing and how psychedelics can help with, PTSD, depression, all these other things. And now they're getting banned, shadow banned. All of these accounts are being taken down because we're just trying to educate. And that's a huge frustration in the mycology field right now. Is a lot of my friends are getting their sites taken away. I actually go to this Oklahoma Mushroom Festival in October, and he's actually not having it this year because they keep taking down his account, and it's really hard to get sponsors when you don't have the following and the funds. And so he's like, we're just not going to have it this year because my account just keeps getting taken down, banned, permanently banned. So he has to like start all over. And that's what a lot of my friends are finding, that a lot of their mushroom education platforms are just now getting demonetized and banned.
Why do you think that's happening?
Have you ever watched the show Common Side Effects?
No.
It is a new show by Adult Swim where this person discovers that this blue psychedelic mushroom can actually heal all ailments. And then the government comes in and tries to get rid of this mushroom and then try to turn it into a product. So either they can't have it or they're going to try to make it into a product where they can sell the mushroom. And so it just reminds me of this, where we're just trying to heal people and all of our good intentions are just trying to educate and heal and make people happy. And then big pharma or whoever is just trying to get the money from it. Obviously, people won't make any money in the medical field if we can just solve all of our problems by taking this free mushroom.
Yeah, not a lot of money in cures, right? Or at least replicable income. You mentioned microdosing, and we're talking about human consciousness. We're talking about healing and the apex of those things. What are some specific bioactive compounds in medicinal mushrooms? And when we're talking about microdosing, let's talk about psilocybin. I full disclosure did multiple experiments with really high quality microdosing for things like anxiety and stress, and I found in particular that the anxiety reduction benefits of microdosing psilocybin was profound for me. So can we dig into that a little bit? Is there any research or evidence that points to microdosing having this kind of benefit?
Yeah, so psilocybin, psilocin are attributes to psychedelic mushrooms, and there's some sort of, the neurons kind of reprogram itself. They have a better growing pattern, and so what mushrooms and even lion's mane paired together have that synergistic effect where when you're taking them, you can kind of connect different pathways that were disconnected. And so a lot of the times, if you're like struggling, Paul Stamets talks about how he took a heroic dose and he had a stuttering problem and he took mushrooms and he just told himself, I don't stutter. And afterwards, he doesn't stutter anymore. And so it's just things like that where it's connecting those pathways that were disconnected. Growth neuron factor. So they're growing together to reprogram, reconnect different pathways. I actually had this lady at the farmer's market, and she was saying that she took mushrooms for her first time. She took a big dose. And just to be clear, you don't have to take a big dose to have like a medicinal aspect or a medicinal attribute to it. Microdosing definitely has profound effects. But this lady took this mushroom dose and she was like, why was I so overwhelmed? Like halfway through, she was very overwhelmed and she was blind in one eye. And she learned that she could actually see halfway through her trip because somehow it reconnected the synapses and she could see out of her eye again. And so she was telling me the story and I was like, mushrooms are so crazy. Like, that's why I love them too. It's like, it's healing. Some can kill you. Some can heal you. Some are just delicious. Like, there's just so many different ways mushrooms are used, like a Swiss Army knife, really. So yeah, that's another example of how like it just connected those pathways. So that's what psilocybin or mushrooms can do for a lot of people. A lot of people struggling with PTSD, you kind of just have that like calming effect where you can now kind of go out in the real world and you're just like, not ambushed by all of these different emotions and other things that has happened to you. You just kind of like homeostasis.
Amazing. So you're talking about reconnecting these neural pathways, certain motor skills come back. What role might mushrooms play in overall cognitive health, brain health, or even slowing down cognitive decline?
A lot of diseases are stemmed from inflammation. So that's kind of why I recommend mushrooms. A lot of people don't like cooking mushrooms, but a lot of people are looking for health benefits. Like a lot of the people I talk to, it's kind of like their last resort of like, I'm struggling with memory loss or, ADHD, Alzheimer's, dementia. How can I what's my last resort? And so a lot of people are using lion's mane with that because of those benefits. Kind of the same thing with the psilocybin that I was talking about. A lot of people pair lion's mane and psilocybin together because they work kind of, in that same way.
Specifically, is there any evidence showing that mushrooms can slow down cognitive decline, like for people that are going through brain health issues, things like that specifically?
Yeah, I'd have to look into more slowing down. I know Brian Johnson is one of those biohacking guys
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
if
yeah,
you know who he is,
definitely.
yeah, he he's definitely trying to reverse his age, like Benjamin Button type stuff. I think that's kind of the main focus now is like what mushrooms can be in place for these. And lion's mane's just getting that like big show right now because of the haricinones and the erinacées. So those are kind of the aspects to lion's mane that have those medicinal benefits. There's also talk on mycelium versus fruiting body. I don't know if you've heard of this either. So a lot of people in like selling mushroom products, they always want to have on there, is it from the fruiting body or is it myceliated grain? So that's something to look for as well. There is some research on how there's other attributes to the mycelium, but a lot of the times it's also in the fruiting body. So it kind of depends on the mushroom. It's really specific, unfortunately, to what mushroom you're taking to be, fruiting body versus mycelium. But that's something to kind of look into the labeling process. I'm sure you and maybe all your listeners kind of read through labels, hopefully, too. It's kind of like how I'd start with any product that you buy, any supplement. Make sure you read what the fillers are. Like half the time, the fillers are like cheese, sugar, or like, wheat for random stuff. Just always look at ingredients.
What are some common myths, misconceptions, outdated belief systems that people have around mushrooms? Is there anything you want to clear up around that?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people think that you can't touch mushrooms, that you'll get sick from mushrooms, but that's completely false. You can touch any mushroom. A little party trick, if you will. You could even nibble on any mushroom. You just cannot swallow the mushroom. Should I go deeper?
Interesting. Yeah, please do.
Okay. So, what mushrooms do to the body when, people are saying these are deadly mushrooms? It's your liver or kidney breaking them down. So, once it enters your digestion system, is when it really starts to take, effect of what these deadly mushrooms would be. But technically, a lot of people even ID a lot of mushrooms by nibbling on them. So, like a lactarius mushroom, you get a little spicy flavor to them. And so a lot of people kind of nibble on them to decipher the ID of identification of these species. So just don't swallow any mushroom, I mean, I guess you can swallow any mushroom once.
You mean in the wild? Like this would be under the guise of I'm out in nature and I'm trying to identify what I'm eating. This is what we're not talking about going to the farmer's market to come see you. We're talking about wild foraging experiences.
Wild foraging experiences. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. So some people use, tasting a mushroom to ID them further. Smell, taste, I guess, and then kind of seeing in the textures. There's so many different ways to ID mushrooms. It's honestly such a skill and an art, I would say, because there's so many aspects, spore print, how the cap is formed, how the stem is arranged, where it's connected, the veil, how it's fruiting out, what's it fruiting on, even the mushrooms, if they're grown together or separately, there's so many things. So definitely don't just, cook up any mushroom that you find. Get somebody to professionally ID it for you.
That's what I was just about to ask. If someone is really excited listening to this episode and curious, would you recommend looking up a local guide in the area who has experience to take someone out into the woods and do it that way?
Yeah, that's a great way to get out and about. I would always say Facebook groups. I think those are maybe overdone by now, but there's always a local mushroom group that you can just kind of join. You can post photos in. I also have friends that are professional IDers on iNaturalist, which is an app that you can just take pictures of all these different mushrooms, insects, plants, and they can actually ID the mushrooms for you. So those are a few of my friends that are actually IDing the mushrooms. So yeah, feel free to post them on Reddit pages or Facebook, how you can ID mushroom or take photos of mushrooms. Make sure they're not just, head on directly. Make sure you take one, maybe split down the middle, kind of get your surroundings where it's at, underneath, on top. At least, 3 to 4 or 5 pictures is a good ID.
Okay, a photo shoot then. We're doing a
Yes,
mushroom photo shoot.
please,
Fantastic.
photo shoot. You with the mushroom. Yeah, definitely.
Is it true that fungi are more genetically similar to animals than to plants? And if that is
Yes.
true, it is true. It is
Yes,
true.
it is
Okay,
true.
what does
Animals,
that
yep.
mean? And
Yeah.
why does that matter? Because that's
Yeah,
wild
yeah.
to me.
Because of what they're made out of, since like the chitin, how I even compared that to the lobster claw. So now we're already kind of at the animals. But yeah, their makeup is very similar to humans itself. So that's kind of why if you're taking like an antifungal cream, you're actually harming your body a little bit more. There's not that many medications that you would take that don't affect you. If you're taking like a medicine to kind of clean out for a fungal, it actually affects your body as well, just because the makeup's very similar. It's really, really interesting. So I think a lot of people are trying to figure out a medication that only targets fungi and not humans, because in the end, you're starting to really kind of break down both the human and the mushroom itself. So yeah, the chitin, the cell work as well. It's weird how it's kind of similar. Plants are pretty cool on their own, but yeah, the mushrooms is a whole nother avenue.
Okay, so I want to dip back to your healing journey really quickly, talking about rheumatoid arthritis, and how, if anything, would you like to share more about how mushrooms have helped you on your personal journey to health and well-being?
I was diagnosed, I'd say maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and I'm 30 years old.
Wow.
So it doesn't run in my family. So I was like, yeah, I'm the starter, I guess.
Oh my God.
So I don't know what it came from. A lot of people kind of ask like what started it. It's really hard with rheumatoid arthritis. I feel like it's so many different factors and you don't really know what it stemmed from. When I started the podcast is actually when I was kind of diagnosed as well. And one of my guests on wanted to take me on this healing journey, and they were talking about using reishi mushroom. And so that's kind of where maybe my love for digging deeper into the mushroom world also stemmed from, because of the lowering of the inflammation. So if you don't know, rheumatoid arthritis is inflammation of the joints. And so any which way I can help, reduce inflammation, I'm all about. So definitely tackling more whole foods. Mushroom is like the best whole foods, where it has all these vitamins, nutrients, protein. Now we've discovered that as well. So yeah, I don't know. It's been a real journey. Honestly, it goes in phases. Some days it's better, some days it's not. But yeah, whole foods, eating certain plants, I guess certain mushrooms. Like I really try to incorporate the chaga, the reishi, and then just trying to have more culinary mushrooms in my diet. So just trying to have at least that, quarter cup a week to lower inflammation. But again, like I was saying, there's so many other factors, because when you have something that really frustrates me within having RA is that all of these health foods that everybody talks about is stuff that flares me up. So like almonds make my feet like inflamed, or like chocolate affects my joints, or nightshades, so peppers and eggplants and spicy food. Like I want to eat spicy food, but the next day I just feel like so tight jointed and in pain and just a little bit more fatigued than maybe the average person. So it's just like very frustrating, where people are like, yeah, we got these almonds, we got this chocolate, caffeine, like all of these things. And I'm like, oh, like, it doesn't really work like that with my body. So I don't know. I'm very eager to kind of learn more and to heal more, taking it one day at a time, really.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing about that.
Yeah, thank you.
For any listeners who are feeling inspired, want to deepen their connection to fungi or the plant kingdom in everyday life, what are some tips or tools you'd recommend to begin that journey?
Yeah, where to start and getting it more into the fungi space, the plant space, just kind of out and about.
Yeah, if someone's like really stoked on this episode and feeling curious and excited to learn more or deepen that connection, where should they begin? What do you recommend for a newbie, someone who's brand new to all this?
For a newbie, I would say depends on what you're really into. Are you into nature? Are you into, going on hikes, discovering new locations? Are you into photography or artwork or cooking? Like, do you want to maybe find a new meal that you'd like to make? Maybe pick up, some local mushrooms at your farmer's market or somewhere where you can try out a new mushroom and kind of incorporate that into a meal. What I like to do is I like to find different parks. I'm part of the Central Florida Mycological Society. So every month we actually meet up at a different park and just kind of go foraging. And then so that's another recommendation that I would do. If you're not all about, the Facebook aspect, which I definitely don't go on Facebook as much, but I definitely like going out in nature and meeting new people. And so these are the places where you will learn so much. There's always that 1 to 18 people that are willing to educate you on your local mushrooms. And, if you find something on the side of the road and you're just like, what is this thing? We will teach you. We will teach you what it's like and what it is. And, if there's a medicinal aspect to it. So, yeah, a lot of people within the mycology space are very, very helpful. We're weird people. We're unique people. We like to spread all of the education and awareness that we can. So get out in nature, just go on a walk, enjoy something new. That's kind of what I would like to say. And also listen to Flora Funga Podcast because I talk about all these different topics. And also, if you want me to cover a specific topic that you're interested in, I would love to kind of dive deeper into that for you.
Amazing. So obviously we've got the great podcast. Are you on any of the social platforms where people can check out more of your content? And if so, where should they go?
Yes, I am Flora Funga Podcast. It's behind me, or FLORA FUNGA Podcast on all social media platforms. I got TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm kind of everywhere. I also have my own website, florafungapodcast.com, where you can check out any episode. I have this awesome search bar actually, where you could just be like medicinal mushrooms or lion's mane or psychedelics, and you can just find all the episodes that are kind of tagged within those. So I try to keep it broad and simple.
As a final question as we wrap, what's next for you in terms of building this community, building this education platform? What are you excited about for the rest of 2025 and beyond? What do you got working on behind the scenes that you could share with us?
Yes. Thank you for asking that. I was finally invited to speak at Telluride Mushroom Festival, which is a mushroom festival in Colorado, in Telluride. It is the second week of August, and it's kind of the gala of mushrooms. So Paul Stamets is actually going to be there. I'm going to be able to hopefully meet him, so that's kind of on my to-do list. I will be actually a speaker at this as well. So that's something that I've been really trying to do in 2025 is kind of invest in myself, get myself out there as more of an expert in the field. So I'll be covering intro to lichen. So that's kind of what I'll be talking about. If you don't know what lichen is, it's a really old little species that has a combination of algae, cyanobacteria. It's kind of like a fungus, kind of like a plant, but like both and neither. Listen and learn upcoming with that. So yeah, I'm really excited to kind of travel more and educate people and kind of get myself out there. Something else that I'm really excited for is I'm trying to film this pilot episode called Nerdy Jobs, where I kind of have a take on of dirty jobs, where I take on different nerdy job aspects. So like environmental degrees. My pilot episode will be on what's it like being a mushroom farmer. So that's kind of what I'm going to dig into, kind of take on, be that for a weekend and really show you what it takes to be these different jobs in the field. That's my goal. That's my end goal, is blasting off nerdy jobs.
Awesome. It sounds exciting, and just appreciate your passion, your enthusiasm, your wisdom. This is clearly something that you are meant to be on and meant to be doing.
Thank you.
Appreciate you, KK. And for those of you out there, dear listeners, drop in and take a listen to the Flora Funga podcast and learn all about the wonderful, wild, wacky, magical world of mushrooms. Thanks again for being here, KK.
Much love.